The first time Harra Ravenshade walked into the old general store with a silver coin, and walked out with half the flour she could have bought in the next village over. She started a list. She kept it on a folded scrap of parchment tucked into the inner pocket of her vest, right against her ribs where no one could see. Every purchase, every price, every quiet theft disguised as commerce. Flour, 8 coppers per pound here, 4 in Milltown. Salt, 12 coppers for a palm-sized pouch here, 6 at the Crossroads Market. Nails, a full silver for a dozen iron nails here, 6 coppers anywhere else. Thread, needles, lamp oil, dried beans, everything the same. Everywhere else fair prices. Here in Thornhearth, for an orc woman with green skin and small tusks and a build that was strong but still shaped like a woman's body double, she did not rage. She did not weep. She wrote it down. Harra had come to Thornhearth 3 seasons ago because the valley soil was rich, and the land office had been willing to sell her 40 acres at the edge of the village boundary for a reasonable price. The land itself did not care that she was an orc. It grew what she planted. Her hands were good with a hoe and a plow, and she had saved enough coin from 5 years of working lumber camps up north to buy seed and tools, and a small mule named Copper, who was the only living thing in Thornhearth that seemed genuinely pleased to see her every morning. The people of Thornhearth were not cruel exactly. They did not throw stones or spit. They simply charged her double and acted as though the prices on the chalkboard behind the counter applied to everyone equally. When she questioned it once, the shopkeeper, a thick-necked man named Garrett Moss, had shrugged and said the prices fluctuated with supply. When she pointed out that the woman ahead of her in line had paid half as much for the same sack of oats, he had stared at her with flat eyes and said he must have misremembered the first transaction. So Harra paid and wrote it down, and went home to her little cabin and her 40 acres, and told herself that someday the list would matter. Someday someone would care that Garrett Moss was a thief who hid behind a chalkboard full of lies. She did not expect that day to arrive behind a wagon piled with lumber and crates, driven by a man who looked like he had been carved from the same oak planks he was hauling. His name was Ivan Harrow, and he arrived on a cold morning in early spring when the fields were still half frozen, and the village square smelled like wet earth and chimney smoke. Harra was walking Copper into the village to buy seed for the planting season, her list tucked against her ribs and her coin purse lighter than she wanted it to be. She saw the wagon first, parked in the empty lot across from Garrett's store, and then the man unloading it. He was tall, broad across the shoulders, with dark hair that needed cutting and a jaw that looked like it had never smiled without a good reason. He wore a simple wool coat and work gloves, and he moved with the steady rhythm of someone who had unloaded 1,000 wagons and expected to unload 1,000 more. He did not look up when Harra walked past. He was busy hauling a heavy crate off the wagon bed, muscles straining under his coat. She led Copper to the post outside Garrett's store and went inside. Garrett was behind the counter, arms crossed, staring out the window at the wagon across the square. He did not greet Harra. He was too busy scowling. "Seed oats," Harra said quietly. "2 bushels." Garrett did not look at her. 16 silver. Harra's jaw tightened. She had bought seed oats in Milltown 2 years ago for 4 silver a bushel. 8 silver total, not 16. But Milltown was a day's travel away, and she needed to plant within the week if she wanted a good harvest. She reached into her purse and counted out 16 silver coins, each one a small, bitter weight. Garrett took them without a word and hefted 2 sacks onto the counter. Harra loaded them onto Copper's back, tied them down, and led the mule back across the square. The man was still unloading his wagon. This time he looked up, His eyes were gray, the color of river stones, and they passed over her without much interest. Just another villager, just another potential customer. He nodded once, a brief acknowledgement, and went back to his work. Harra led Copper home and added the seed oats to her list. 16 silver. Double. 3 days later, a sign went up in the empty lot. It was a wooden board, freshly planed and painted white, with black letters carefully stenciled across it. Harrow's General Store. Fair prices. And below that, in slightly larger letters, half. Harra saw it on her way into the village to buy lamp oil. She stopped and stared. Half. Half of what? Half of Garrett's prices. That was the only thing that made sense, but it seemed impossible. No one undercut Garrett. Garrett had owned the only general store in Thornhearth for 20 years. He had a relationship with the freight company that ran the supply road from the southern trade city. He sold everything anyone in Thornhearth needed, and if you did not like his prices, you could travel a day to Milltown or 2 days to the crossroads and spend more on travel than you saved on goods. But there was the sign. And there was the man, Ivan Harrow, standing in the open doorway of what had been an empty shop, sweeping dust out onto the street. Harra tied Copper to the post and walked across the square. Ivan looked up when her shadow fell across the threshold. He leaned the broom against the wall and wiped his hands on his trousers. "Help you?" His voice was low and rough like gravel underfoot. "The sign," Harra said. "It says half." "That's right. Half of what?" "Half of what Garrett charges." Ivan nodded toward the store across the square. "I spent 2 days watching what folks paid over there. Wrote it all down. My prices are half. Exactly half." Harra felt something strange bloom in her chest, something cautious and fragile like the first green shoot pushing up through thawing soil. "For everyone." Ivan's gray eyes settled on her face, steady and unblinking. "I've got a price board inside. Same price for everyone who walks through that door, no exceptions." "Why? Because I'm not a thief." He said it simply, as though it were the most obvious thing in the world. Harra had heard a lot of words in her life, promises and apologies and explanations that all crumbled under the weight of action. But there was something about the way Ivan said it, flat and certain, that made her believe him. "I need lamp oil," she said. "I've got lamp oil. 6 coppers a bottle." 6 coppers. Garrett charged 12. For everyone else he charged 6. For Harra, 12. She followed Ivan inside. The shop was still mostly empty, crates stacked along the walls, but there was a counter and a shelf behind it with a few rows of goods already arranged. Lamp oil, flour, salt, beans, nails, thread. The essentials. And on the wall behind the counter, a board with every item and every price written in the same careful hand that had painted the sign outside. Ivan pulled a bottle of lamp oil from the shelf and set it on the counter. 6 coppers. Harra counted them out. Her hands were steady, but her heart was beating faster than it should have been. 6 coppers. Half. "Thank you," she said. Ivan nodded and made a note in a ledger on the counter. She saw her purchase written down in neat columns. Lamp oil, 6 coppers, paid in full. She walked out with the bottle tucked under her arm and a feeling in her chest that she did not have a name for. Over the next 2 weeks, Ivan's shop filled in. More crates arrived, more goods appeared on the shelves. Harra came back 4 times. Once for flour, once for nails, once for a coil of rope, once for salt. Every time, Ivan charged her exactly what the board said. Every time he wrote it down in his ledger. Every time he treated her the same way he treated the handful of other customers who had started to drift in. Brief, businesslike, fair. On her 5th visit, she brought her list. Ivan was restocking a shelf when she walked in. He glanced over his shoulder, nodded, and went back to his work. Harra waited at the counter, the folded parchment warm against her palm. When he finished, he wiped his hands and came to the counter. "What do you need today?" "Nothing," Harra said. "I want to show you something." She unfolded the list and spread it on the counter. Ivan looked down at it. His expression did not change, but his eyes moved slowly over the lines of her handwriting, taking in every item, every price, every careful notation. "This is what Garrett charges you," he said after a long moment. "Yes." "This is double what he charges everyone else." "Yes." Ivan was quiet. He picked up the parchment and held it closer, reading every line. Harra watched his face. There was no shock, no outrage, just a slow, cold hardening around his eyes. "How long?" he asked. "Since I arrived." "3 seasons." Ivan set the list down carefully, as though it were something fragile. "Do you have receipts?" "Garrett does not give receipts." "I do." Ivan turned and pulled his ledger from under the counter. He flipped it open and turned it so she could see. Every transaction, every customer, every price, all written down in neat rows. "I keep copies. One for me, one for the customer. If someone ever questions a price, we both have proof." Harra stared at the ledger. It was such a simple thing. Ink and paper. But it was also a shield, a weapon, a kind of honesty she had not seen in a long time. "Keep your list," Ivan said. "And start shopping here. Every time you buy something from me instead of Garrett, that's proof that my prices are fair and his are not. If enough people do the same, we will have enough evidence to take to the village council. The council will not care. Half of them buy from Garrett at the normal price. They do not see the problem. Then we make them see it." Ivan's voice was firm, no room for doubt. "You've been keeping track. I've been keeping track. Between the two of us, we have proof. We just need enough of it that they cannot look away." Harra looked at him, this broad, blunt man who had walked into Thornhearth and opened a shop that charged half, and she felt the fragile thing in her chest grow a little stronger. "All right," she said. Over the next month, Harra bought everything she needed from Ivan's shop. Every purchase went into his ledger. Every price was exactly half of what Garrett charged her, and exactly the same as what Garrett charged everyone else. She saw other customers begin to drift toward Ivan's store as well. A farmer who needed nails and found them cheaper. A woman who needed flour and appreciated the clear price board. A young man who needed a new axe handle and liked that Ivan did not haggle or upsell. Garrett noticed. Of course he noticed. His store grew quieter. His scowl deepened. And one morning, when Harra walked into the village square, she saw him standing outside Ivan's shop, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You are stealing my customers," Garrett said. Ivan was sweeping the front step. He did not stop. "I am selling goods at fair prices. If people prefer to shop here, that is their choice. You are selling at a loss. There is no way you are making a profit at those prices. My profit margin is my business, not yours. This is my village. I have been here for 20 years. You do not get to walk in and undercut me." Ivan stopped sweeping. He leaned the broom against the wall and looked at Garrett. "I am not undercutting you. I am charging what things actually cost. You are the one who has been overcharging for 20 years. Garrett's face flushed red. "I have expenses, freight costs, taxes. You do not know what it takes to run a store in a place like this." "I know exactly what it takes. I ran a supply depot for the army for 6 years before I came here. I know what freight costs. I know what wholesale prices are. And I know you are charging double what you should be." Garrett's hands curled into fists. For a moment, Harra thought he might swing. But Ivan did not move, did not flinch, just stood there with his arms at his sides and his gray eyes steady. Garrett looked at him, then at Harra, then turned and stalked back to his own store. Ivan picked up his broom and went back to sweeping. Harra approached slowly. "He is going to retaliate, probably. You should be careful," Ivan glanced at her. So should you. You are the one he has been robbing for 3 seasons. I am used to it. That does not make it right. Harra did not have an answer for that. She bought a sack of beans and went home. 2 weeks later, Ivan ran out of flour. It was the first thing to go, because flour was a staple and Ivan's price was half of Garrett's. He put in an order with the freight company that ran the supply road, the same company he had been using since he opened the shop. The order should have arrived in 5 days. It did not. After 10 days, Ivan sent a message. The reply came back terse and formal. Due to increased demand and limited capacity, the freight company was prioritizing long-standing clients. New clients would experience delays. Ivan read the letter twice, then set it on the counter and stared at it. Harra was in the shop buying nails. She saw the look on his face. "What is wrong?" He handed her the letter. She read it, and her jaw tightened. "Garrett did this." "Probably. He has been using that freight company for 20 years. They are likely friends, or he pays them enough that they are willing to freeze me out." "Can you use a different company?" "There is only one company that runs the supply road. They bought out the others 5 years ago. It is a monopoly." Harra set the letter down. Her mind was already working, turning over possibilities. "There is another route." Ivan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The supply road is not the only way to bring goods into Thornhearth. There is a pack trail through the mountains, an old trade route that my clan has used for generations. It is steeper and slower, but it does not go through the freight company's territory. If you can get your goods to the mountain pass, my clan can bring them the rest of the way." Ivan was quiet for a moment. "That would work." "Yes, my cousin runs the pack trains. He owes me a favor and he does not like monopolies any more than you do." "How much would it cost?" "Less than the freight company charges because the route is shorter, and he will not freeze you out because Garrett asks nicely." Ivan looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since she had walked into his shop a month ago. His gray eyes were steady and serious. "You would do that?" "You have been charging me fair prices since the day you opened. That is worth more than you know." Something shifted in Ivan's face, a softness she had not seen before. "All right, let's do it." Harra sent a message to her cousin that evening. His reply came back 3 days later. He would be happy to run a pack train for Ivan's goods, and his rates would be 20% lower than the freight companies. Ivan sent new orders directly to the southern trade city, with instructions to deliver them to the mountain pass. 2 weeks later, the first pack train arrived, mules loaded with flour and salt and lamp oil and everything Ivan's shop had been running low on. The villagers noticed. They saw the mules coming down from the mountains instead of up the supply road. They saw Ivan's shelves restocked. They saw Garrett's scowl deepen into something darker, and they started asking questions. Harra was in the village square one afternoon when an older woman approached her. Her name was Meredith, and she had lived in Thornhearth her whole life. She was carrying a basket of turnips and looked tired. "Is it true you are helping Ivan bring goods in through the mountains?" Meredith asked. Harra nodded. "Yes." "Why?" "Because the freight company is trying to shut him down, and he has done nothing wrong except charge fair prices." Meredith was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I have been buying from Garrett for 30 years. I never thought about the prices much, but my daughter visited from Milltown last month and she was shocked at what I was paying for flour. She said I was being robbed." "You are." "Is Ivan really charging half?" "Exactly half. And he keeps a ledger so you can see every transaction." Meredith looked across the square at Ivan's shop, then back at Harra. "I think I will buy my flour from him from now on." She was not the only one. Over the next few weeks, more villagers drifted toward Ivan's shop. They compared prices. They looked at the clear, honest numbers on his price board. They remembered times when Garrett's prices had seemed high, but they had not questioned it because there was no alternative. Now there was an alternative, and it was half the cost. Garrett's store grew quieter and quieter. Harra saw the change in Ivan too. He was still blunt and slow to smile, but there was a warmth in the way he greeted her now when she came into the shop. He asked about her planting, about copper, about whether the pack trains were running on schedule. He started setting aside things he thought she might need before she asked for them. A new hoe blade when he noticed hers was worn. A packet of seeds for a crop she had mentioned wanting to try. Small things, but they added up. One evening, after the shop had closed and Harra had stopped by to drop off a message from her cousin about the next pack train, Ivan invited her to stay for supper. She hesitated. It felt like crossing a line, moving from customer and ally to something else. But Ivan was already pulling out bread and cheese and a jug of cider, setting them on the counter with an easy practicality that made it seem like the most natural thing in the world. "You have been helping me keep this shop running," he said. "Least I can do is share a meal." Harra sat on a stool on the customer side of the counter. Ivan sat on a crate on his side. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind of quiet that did not need filling. "Why did you come to Thornhearth?" Harra asked eventually. Ivan chewed a bite of bread and thought about it. "I was tired of the army, tired of taking orders, tired of moving every few months. I wanted to build something that was mine, a place where I made the rules and those rules were fair. You could have gone anywhere, opened a shop in a city. Cities are full of competition and noise. I wanted someplace quieter, someplace where a fair price would actually matter." He paused. "What about you? Why did you come here?" "I wanted land, a place to grow things, a place that was mine." Harra looked down at her hands, strong and scarred from years of hard work. "I knew it would be harder as an orc. I knew people would not trust me, but I thought if I worked hard and kept to myself, I could make it work. And then Garrett started robbing you." "Yes." Ivan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I am sorry." Harra looked up, surprised. "You did not do anything. I know, but I am still sorry it happened." His gray eyes were serious. "You should not have to keep a list of every time someone cheats you just to prove you are not imagining it." Harra felt a tightness in her chest, the kind that came before tears, but she blinked it away. "Thank you." They finished the meal in silence, but it was a different kind of silence now, warmer, closer. When Harra left, Ivan walked her to the door. "Same time next week for the pack train?" "Yes." "My cousin says they will have a full load." "Good." Ivan hesitated, then added, "You are welcome to stop by for supper again, if you want." Harra looked at him, this broad, blunt man who had charged her fair prices and believed her when she showed him her list, and was now offering her supper like it was the simplest thing in the world. "I would like that." She walked home under a sky full of stars, and the fragile thing in her chest bloomed a little brighter. The supper invitations became a routine. Once a week, after the shop closed, Harra would stop by and they would share a meal. Sometimes bread and cheese, sometimes stew, once a roasted chicken that Ivan had traded for with a farmer. They talked about practical things mostly, the pack trains, the shop, the planting season. But sometimes the conversations drifted into other territory. Ivan told her about his years in the army, the friends he had lost, the reasons he had left. Harra told him about her family, her clan in the northern mountains, the way she had left to find her own path, because staying would have meant following traditions she did not believe in. They did not talk about the fact that Ivan was human and Harra was an orc, or that in most places their friendship would have been taboo, or that sitting together over supper felt like crossing a line that much of the world would rather they did not cross. They just ate and talked and discovered that they liked each other's company. Spring turned into summer. Harra's fields grew thick with oats and turnips and squash. Ivan's shop thrived, supplied by the steady flow of pack trains from the mountains. More and more villagers abandoned Garrett's store for Ivan's fair prices and clear ledgers. Garrett's scowl became a permanent fixture, and he stopped speaking to anyone who shopped at Ivan's. And then, one morning in late summer, Garrett made his move. Harra was in the village square when she saw the man from the freight company arrive. He was tall and thin, with a sharp face and expensive clothes. He went straight to Garrett's store and stayed inside for over an hour. When he came out, he walked across the square to Ivan's shop. Harra followed. The man was standing at Ivan's counter, a folded piece of parchment in his hand. Ivan was reading it, his face unreadable. "What is this?" Ivan asked. "A letter from the freight company," the man said. His voice was smooth and cold. "We have been informed that you are using an unlicensed trade route to bring goods into Thornhearth. The mountain pass falls under our jurisdiction, and any commercial traffic through that pass requires a freight license. Since you do not have one, you are in violation of our agreement with the village council." Ivan looked up. "The mountain pass does not fall under your jurisdiction. It is clan land. It has been used as a trade route for generations. Not for commercial freight. Personal travel, yes. Commercial goods, no. If you want to continue using that route, you will need to purchase a freight license from us." The man smiled thinly. "The cost is 50 gold per season. 50 gold. It was an absurd amount, far more than the pack trains cost, far more than Ivan could afford to pay and still keep his prices at half of Garrett's. Harra felt a cold fury settle into her bones. "That is extortion." The man glanced at her, his eyes dismissive. "That is business." "No," Harra said. "That is Garrett paying you to shut down his competition." The man's smile did not waver. "I do not know what you are talking about. The freight company has legitimate concerns about unlicensed commercial traffic. If Mr. Harrow wants to continue operating, he will need to comply with our regulations." Ivan set the letter down carefully. "And if I do not? Then we will take the matter to the village council and request that your shop be shut down for operating in violation of trade agreements." The man turned and walked out, leaving the letter on the counter. Harra looked at Ivan. His face was still unreadable, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. "They cannot do this," she said. "They can if the council sides with them." "The council will not side with them. Half the village shops at your store now. They know your prices are fair. Garrett has been here for 20 years. He has relationships. He has influence." Ivan picked up the letter and stared at it. "If it comes down to a vote, I am not sure I will win." Harra felt the fury in her chest sharpen into something colder and more focused. "Then we do not let it come down to a vote. We end this before it gets that far." Ivan looked at her. "How?" Harra thought about her list, folded and tucked against her ribs. She thought about the ledger on Ivan's counter, full of fair prices and honest transactions. She thought about the villagers who had started shopping at Ivan's store because they were tired of being overcharged. "We show them the truth," she said. "All of it, side by side. Garrett's prices and yours, my list and your ledger. We make it so obvious that even the council cannot ignore it." Ivan was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right, let's do it." They spent the next 3 days preparing. Harra copied her list onto a larger piece of parchment, every item and every price written in clear, careful letters. Ivan pulled excerpts from his ledger showing what he charged versus what Garrett charged for the same items. They gathered statements from villagers who had been overcharged by Garrett for years and had only realized it when Ivan's shop opened. They compiled receipts, invoices, and records from the pack trains showing that the Mountain Pass route was legal and legitimate. By the time they were finished, they had a stack of evidence thick enough to choke on. The village council met once a month in the hall next to the square. The next meeting was scheduled for the following evening. Harra and Ivan arrived early, their evidence carefully organized in a leather satchel. The council consisted of 5 members, 3 farmers, a blacksmith, and a woman who ran the village inn. Garrett was already there, sitting in the front row with his arms crossed and his expression smug. The man from the freight company sat beside him. The council head, a grizzled farmer named Thomas, called the meeting to order. "We have a complaint from the freight company regarding unlicensed commercial traffic through the Mountain Pass. Mr. Harrow, you are accused of violating trade agreements. How do you respond?" Ivan stood. He was calm, steady, every inch the man who had spent 6 years running a supply depot for the army. "I respond that the accusation is false. The Mountain Pass is clan land, not freight company territory. The pack trains I use are licensed through the clan and operate legally. The freight company is attempting to force me to pay for a license I do not need in order to shut down my business." Thomas frowned. "Why would they want to shut down your business?" "Because I am charging fair prices and cutting into Garrett Moss's profit." A murmur ran through the room. Garrett's face flushed red. "That is a lie. It is not." Ivan opened the satchel and pulled out the evidence. "I have proof. Harra, if you would." Harra stood and spread her list on the table in front of the council. "This is a record of every purchase I made from Garrett's store over the past 3 seasons. Every item, every price. I also have records from other villages showing what those same items cost elsewhere. Garrett has been charging me double for everything." Thomas leaned forward and studied the list. The other council members crowded around. Harra saw their expressions shift from curiosity to surprise to anger. "This cannot be right," the blacksmith said. "Garrett, you charged her 16 silver for 2 bushels of seed oats. That is 4 times the normal price." "She is an orc," Garrett said flatly. "There are additional risks in selling to her kind." The room went silent. Harra felt the words like a slap, but she kept her face calm. She had heard worse. She had been hearing worse her entire life. Ivan's voice cut through the silence, cold and hard. "There are no additional risks. She pays in coin, same as everyone else. She has never caused trouble, never stolen, never failed to pay. You have been robbing her because you thought you could get away with it." "I have been running my business as I see fit," Garrett snapped. "You have been running a fraud." Ivan pulled out his ledger and set it beside Harra's list. "These are my records. Every item, every price, every customer. I charge half of what you charge, and I still make a profit. That means you have been overcharging everyone in this village for years and overcharging Harra double that." Thomas looked at the ledger, then at the list, then at Garrett. "Is this true?" Garrett's jaw worked. "My prices are my business. Your prices are robbery." The voice came from the back of the room. Meredith, the older woman who had started buying from Ivan, stood up. "I have been paying your prices for 30 years, Garrett, and I never questioned them because I did not have a choice. But now I do, and I am not paying your prices anymore." Another villager stood. Then another. One by one, people who had been shopping at Ivan's store spoke up, listing the items they had bought from Garrett over the years and the prices they had paid. The council listened, their faces growing darker with every statement. Finally, Thomas held up a hand for silence. He looked at Garrett. "You have been cheating this village for years. You have been cheating one of our residents even worse because of her race. That is unacceptable. You cannot prove we have proof." Thomas gestured at the table covered in lists and ledgers and statements. More than enough. The council will take a vote on whether to revoke your business license. Garrett stood abruptly. You cannot do that. I have been here for 20 years. I have relationships with the freight company, with the suppliers, with— You have been stealing from us for 20 years, the blacksmith interrupted. I do not care about your relationships. I care about fair prices. The vote was unanimous. Garrett's business license was revoked, effective immediately. He was given 1 week to sell his remaining inventory and vacate the property. If he refused, the council would seize his goods and distribute them to his victims as restitution. Garrett stared at them, his face pale with shock and rage. Then he turned and stormed out of the hall. The man from the freight company followed, his smooth smile finally gone. The room erupted into conversation. Thomas banged his gavel for order, then looked at Ivan and Harra. Mr. Harrow, Miss Ravenshade, thank you for bringing this to our attention. The council formally recognizes your use of the mountain pass route as legal and legitimate. The freight company has no authority to interfere. Ivan nodded. Thank you. Thomas hesitated, then added, and Miss Ravenshade, I apologize. On behalf of the council and this village, I apologize for what you have endured. It should never have happened. Harra felt the tightness in her chest again, but this time she let the tears come. Just a little, just enough. Thank you. The meeting adjourned. Villagers crowded around them, shaking Ivan's hand, thanking Harra, promising to shop at Ivan's store and nowhere else. Meredith hugged Harra, her old arms surprisingly strong, when the crowd finally cleared. Ivan and Harra walked out into the night together. The air was cool and smelled like wood smoke and summer fields. The stars were bright overhead. We did it, Harra said quietly. You did it, Ivan corrected. You kept the list. You found the solution with the pack trains. You stood up in front of the council and told the truth even though it was hard. You believed me. You gave me a reason to hope the truth would matter. They walked in silence for a while, side by side through the empty square. What will you do now? Harra asked. Keep running the shop. Keep charging fair prices. Ivan glanced at her. And I was thinking, if you were interested, we could make the pack train arrangement permanent. Your cousin's rates are good, and it would give the village a second supply route in case the freight company ever tries to cause trouble again. He would agree to that. Good. Ivan paused. I was also thinking we could expand the shop, bring in more goods, serve more customers, but I would need a partner. Someone who knows the pack routes, who has relationships with the clans, who understands what it is like to build something from nothing. Harra stopped walking. She turned to look at him. Are you offering me a partnership? Ivan met her eyes. Yes, equal partnership, equal profits. Your name on the shop board next to mine. Harra's heart was beating fast. Ivan, I am an orc. People already talk about us working together. If we are partners, if my name is on the board, it will be worse. Let them talk. They talked when I opened a shop that charged half and we proved them wrong. They can talk about this too and we will prove them wrong again. Ivan's voice was steady, certain. You are the best ally I have ever had. I trust you. I want to build this with you. Harra felt the fragile thing in her chest, the thing that had bloomed when Ivan first charged her a fair price, grow into something strong and sure and undeniable. Yes, I want that too. Ivan smiled. It was a slow smile, unpracticed, but it lit up his whole face. Good. They shook hands there in the square under the stars, and the deal was done. Over the next 2 months, they transformed the shop. Harra brought in goods from her clan's territory, mountain herbs, woven baskets, clay pottery, things that Thornhearth had never seen before. Ivan expanded the inventory, bringing in tools and fabrics and specialty items from the southern trade city. They hired a carpenter to build more shelves and a larger counter. They commissioned a new sign for the front of the shop. The day the sign went up, half the village came out to see it. It was larger than the old one, painted white with black letters, Harra and Ravenshade General Store, fair prices for everyone. Harra stood next to Ivan, staring up at it. Her name on a shop in a village that had charged her double for everything. Her name next to his, equal and permanent. It looks good, Ivan said. It does. They opened the shop that morning to a line of customers stretching out the door. Villagers who had been shopping there for months, and new customers who had heard about the council meeting and wanted to support a store that stood for fairness. Harra worked the counter alongside Ivan, taking orders, making change, writing everything down in the ledger. It was hard work, but it was good work. The kind of work that built something. That evening, after the last customer left and they locked the door, Ivan pulled out a bottle of wine he had been saving. They sat on crates behind the counter and drank from tin cups, too tired to bother with anything fancier. To fair prices, Ivan said, raising his cup. To partnerships, Harra added. They drank, and the wine was sweet and warm. I have been thinking, Ivan said after a while, about the shop. About what comes next. What comes next? We have proven that fair prices work. We have built something good here. But it is not just about the shop anymore, is it? Harra looked at him. His gray eyes were serious, but there was a softness in them she had not seen before. What do you mean? I mean us. Working together, building this together. It is not just business anymore. Harra's heart started beating faster. No, it is not. Ivan set down his cup. I care about you, Harra, more than I probably should, more than is convenient, but I do. Ivan, I know it is complicated. I know people will talk. I know there are places where what I am feeling would be forbidden. But I do not care about those places. I care about this place. I care about you. Harra set down her own cup. Her hands were shaking. I care about you too. I have for a while now. I just did not know if you felt the same. I do. They sat there for a moment, the truth hanging between them, fragile and precious. Then Ivan reached out and took her hand. His palm was warm and calloused, a working man's hand. Harra's was the same. They fit together like they had been made for it. So what do we do now? Harra asked quietly. We keep building. The shop, our lives. Whatever this is between us. Ivan squeezed her hand gently. We take it one day at a time, and we do not let anyone tell us it is wrong. Harra felt tears prick her eyes again, but they were good tears this time. I would like that. Ivan smiled, that slow, unpracticed smile that lit up his whole face. So would I. They sat there behind the counter, hands clasped, and outside the shop the village of Thornhearth settled into the quiet of evening. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A door closed. The wind rustled through the fields. And for the first time since Harra had arrived in Thornhearth 3 seasons ago, she felt like she was home. The months that followed were not without challenges. There were villagers who disapproved of the partnership, who muttered about orcs and humans and the wrongness of mixing. There were customers who stopped shopping at the store because they could not stomach the idea of giving their coin to an orc woman, even one who charged fair prices. There were cold looks and whispered comments, and the occasional slur thrown when they thought Harra could not hear. But there were more people who did not care. More people who saw 2 hard-working shopkeepers who treated everyone fairly and kept their word. More people who appreciated that the store was a place where a copper was a copper and a promise was a promise, no matter who you were. The pack trains kept running. Harra's cousin expanded the route, bringing in goods from 3 different clans and opening up trade relationships that had been dormant for years. The shop prospered. Ivan and Harra worked side by side, learning each other's rhythms, building something that was greater than the sum of its parts. And slowly, carefully, they built something else too, It started with small things. Ivan walking Harra home after late nights at the shop. Harra bringing him lunch from her garden, fresh vegetables and bread she had baked herself. Conversations that stretched longer and deeper, moving from business to dreams to fears to hopes. Touches that lingered a moment longer than necessary. Glances that said more than words. One evening in late autumn, after the harvest was in and the fields were turning gold, Ivan closed the shop early. He told Harra he wanted to show her something. They walked out of the village and up into the hills, following a narrow path that wound through the trees. At the top of the hill, the path opened into a clearing. The view stretched for miles, the village below, the fields beyond, the mountains rising in the distance. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the sun sinking toward the horizon. "I used to come up here when I first arrived," Ivan said. "When I was trying to decide if I had made the right choice, opening the shop in Thornhearth. It helped to see the whole picture, to remember that I was building something bigger than one day, one customer, one sale." Harra stood beside him, looking out over the valley. "Do you still come here?" "Sometimes, but it is better with you here." She looked at him. He was staring out at the horizon, his profile sharp against the fading light. He looked like a man who had found his place in the world and intended to keep it. "I love you," Harra said. The words came out before she could stop them, simple and true. Ivan turned to her, his gray eyes wide with surprise. For a moment he did not say anything. Then he smiled, that slow, unpracticed smile, and pulled her into his arms. "I love you too," he said into her hair. "I have for a while now. I just did not know how to say it." Harra wrapped her arms around him and held on tight. He was solid and warm and real, and for the first time in her life, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They stood there in the clearing as the sun set and the stars came out, holding each other and watching the world turn from day to night. When they finally walked back down the hill, hand in hand, Harra knew that something fundamental had shifted. They were not just partners anymore. They were not just friends. They were something more, something deeper, something worth fighting for. Winter came, and with it the quiet season. The fields slept under a blanket of snow. The pack trains ran less frequently, though they never stopped entirely. The shop stayed busy with villagers stocking up on supplies for the cold months ahead. Ivan and Harra spent the long winter evenings together, sometimes in the shop going over the books, sometimes in Harra's cabin by the fire, sometimes in the room above the shop that Ivan had been using as living quarters. They talked and laughed and planned for the spring. They learned each other in the way that people do when they have time and space, and no reason to hide. Harra learned that Ivan had a scar on his left shoulder from a training accident in the army, and that he could not stand the taste of mushrooms, and that he sang quietly to himself when he thought no one was listening. Ivan learned that Harra was afraid of deep water, and that she had a talent for sketching, and that she cried when she was angry instead of when she was sad. They learned that they fit together in ways that had nothing to do with logic or reason, or what the world thought was right. They fit because they chose to fit, because they made space for each other, because they built something together that neither of them could have built alone. In the deep cold of midwinter, Ivan asked Harra to marry him. They were in her cabin, sitting by the fire after supper. Copper was dozing in his stall outside. The wind howled around the corners of the cabin, but inside it was warm and safe. "I have been thinking," Ivan said, "about the future, about what we are building." "The shop is doing well," Harra said. "We will have a good year once spring comes." "I do not mean the shop, I mean us." Harra looked at him. He was staring into the fire, his face serious. "I want to marry you," Ivan said. "I want to stand in front of the village and the council and anyone else who cares to watch, and I want to say that you are mine and I am yours." I want to make it official, legal, permanent." Harra felt her breath catch. "Ivan, we are human and orc. There are laws in some places, not here. I checked with the council. There is no law in Thornhearth against interspecies marriage. It is rare, but it is legal." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes steady. "I know it will not be easy. I know people will talk, but I do not care. I want to marry you, Harra, if you will have me." Harra felt tears stream down her face. She did not try to stop them. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Ivan pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and the fire crackled and the wind howled and the world outside the cabin did not matter at all. They married in the spring, on a bright morning when the fields were green and the air smelled like growing things. The ceremony was held in the village square, in front of the shop with their names on the sign. Thomas, the council head, officiated. Meredith and Harra's cousin and a dozen other villagers stood witness. Harra wore a simple dress she had sewn herself, green to match her skin. Ivan wore his best shirt and a vest that Harra had embroidered with a pattern from her clan. They stood facing each other, hands clasped, and spoke the vows they had written together. "I promise to stand with you," Ivan said. "In success and failure, in plenty and want, in joy and sorrow. I promise to build with you, to fight for you, to love you every day for the rest of my life." "I promise to trust you," Harra said. "To be honest with you, to work beside you, to never let fear or doubt or the judgment of others come between us. I promise to love you with everything I am, for as long as I live." Thomas pronounced them married, and the crowd cheered, and Ivan kissed Harra in the middle of the square while the sun shone down and the world watched. There was a feast afterward, tables set up in the square piled high with food and drink. Villagers who had once charged Harra double now broke bread with her and wished her happiness. The blacksmith gave them a set of iron hooks for the shop. Meredith gave them a quilt she had sewn herself. Harra's cousin gave them a pair of matching cloaks made from mountain wool, dyed the deep blue of the high country sky. As the sun set and the lanterns were lit, Harra and Ivan stood together at the edge of the square, watching the celebration. His arm was around her waist. Her head rested on his shoulder. "Are you happy?" Ivan asked quietly. "Yes. Are you?" "More than I ever thought I would be." They stood there in the warm spring evening, surrounded by the people of Thornhearth, and Harra thought about the list she had kept for 3 seasons. Every overcharge, every theft, every quiet injustice written down in careful letters. She still had it, tucked away in a drawer in the cabin. She would keep it, not because she needed it anymore, but because it was a reminder. A reminder of where she had started, and how far she had come, and the man who had believed her when she showed him the truth. The years that followed were good ones. The shop continued to thrive. The pack trains became a permanent fixture, bringing goods from the mountains and opening up trade routes that enriched the whole region. Harra's farm produced bumper crops year after year, and she and Ivan expanded the cabin into a proper house with room for a family. The first spring after they married, Harra realized she was pregnant. She told Ivan one evening in the shop, after the last customer had left and they were closing up for the night. He picked her up and spun her around, laughing like a boy, and Harra laughed too, dizzy with joy and disbelief. Their daughter was born in midwinter, small and squalling and perfect. She had Ivan's gray eyes and Harra's green skin and the tiniest tusks Harra had ever seen. They named her Petra, after Ivan's mother, and she was the light of their lives. Petra grew up in the shop, learning to count by sorting copper coins, learning her letters from the price board, learning fairness and honesty from watching her parents treat every customer with the same respect. She was smart and curious and stubborn, and she had her mother's gift for seeing injustice and her father's determination to fix it. When Petra was 3, Harra gave birth to a son. They named him Joran after Harra's grandfather, and he was quieter than his sister but just as determined. He liked to sit in the shop and watch people, studying their faces, learning to read them the way his father read ledgers. The family grew. The shop grew. Thornhearth grew. And through it all, Ivan and Harra stood side by side, partners in every sense of the word, building a life that was fair and honest and full of love. One evening, many years later, when Petra was grown and helping to run the shop and Joran was apprenticing with the blacksmith, Ivan and Harra walked up to the clearing on the hill. It had become their place over the years, the spot they went to when they needed to see the whole picture. They stood at the edge of the clearing, looking out over the valley. The village had grown, new houses and shops spreading out from the square. The fields were green and golden in the late summer light. The mountains rose in the distance, solid and eternal. "You ever regret it?" Ivan asked. It was the question he had never asked, the one Harra had been waiting for and dreading in equal measure. But when she looked at him, standing there with gray in his hair and lines around his eyes and a lifetime of love in his face, she knew the answer. "No," she said simply. "Not for a moment." Ivan smiled, that slow, unpracticed smile she had fallen in love with all those years ago. "Neither do I." They stood there as the sun set, hand in hand, watching the world they had built together. A world where a copper was a copper and a promise was a promise. A world where an orc woman and a human man could stand side by side and build something fair and honest and good. A world where love was the fairest price of all. Below them, in the village square, the sign still hung above the shop. Harrow and Ravenshade General Store. Fair prices for everyone. The letters were faded now, worn by years of sun and rain and wind, but the words were still clear, still true, and they always would be.